Chapter 6. Continuing from the previous chapter. Charity bazaars in Stargorod were known for their extravagance and the ingenuity displayed by the ladies of Stargorod's elite society. These bazaars would transform into scenes like a Moscow tavern or a Caucasian village. Caucasian women, sporting double chins and corsets, would sell champagne at prices unheard of, even at such lofty events, all to benefit orphan children. At one of these bazaars under a sign that read, Authentic Caucasian Tavern, Genuine Caucasian Delights, Ippolit Matveyevich met the wife of the new district prosecutor, Elena Stanislavovna Burr. The prosecutor was old, but his wife, according to the court secretary, was youth itself stirring, youth itself rejoicing, calling for kisses, so airy and light. The court secretary was prone to writing bad poetry. This calling for kisses, Elena Stanislavovna wore a black velvet saucer on her head, adorned with a silk rosette in the colors of the French flag, meant to represent the full attire of a young Circassian maiden. The airy prosecutor's wife carried a cardboard jug covered in gold paper, from which the neck of a champagne bottle protruded. "Allow me a glass of champagne," Ippolit Matveyevich said gallantly. The prosecutor's wife smiled sweetly and lowered the jug from her shoulder. Ippolit Matveyevich, holding his breath, watched her bare, waxy hands clumsily open the bottle. He drank his glass like water, barely tasting it. Elena Stanislavovna's bare hands had completely scrambled his thoughts. He pulled a 100-ruble note from his vest pocket, placed it on the edge of a cliff made of brown papier-mâché, and walked away with a loud sniff. The prosecutor's wife smiled even more sweetly, pulled the bill toward her, and said in a musical voice, "The poor children will never forget your generosity." From a distance, Ippolit Matveyevich pressed his hands to his chest and bowed a full yard deeper than usual. Straightening up, he realized he couldn't live without the prosecutor's wife and asked the court secretary to introduce him to the new prosecutor. The prosecutor resembled an intelligent monkey. As he strolled with Ippolit Matveyevich between a replica of Tamara's castle and a stuffed eagle perched on a chair, holding a donation cup in its beak, Prosecutor Burr scratched behind his ear and shared the latest news from St. Petersburg. That evening, Vorobyaninov had several more conversations with Elena Stanislavovna about the plight of orphaned children and the picturesque beauty of Stargorod's park. Next day, Ippolit Matveyevich arrived at the Burr's entrance in the world's fiercest horses, spent half an hour in pleasant conversation about the plight of orphaned children, and a month later, the court secretary confidentially whispered into the hairy ear of the investigator for important cases that the prosecutor seems to be getting angry. The investigator smirked and replied, "This case needs to be chewed over," and recounted a very interesting case that had been heard in the city of Oriol, which ended with the acquittal of a husband who had murdered his adulterous wife. Throughout the city, the ladies were chirping like nightingales. Husbands envied Vorobyanov's success. Moralists, teetotalers, and idealists bombarded the prosecutor with anonymous letters. The prosecutor read them at court sessions, scratching behind his ear quickly and skillfully. He was more courteous to Vorobyaninov than before. His situation was hopeless. He was expecting a transfer to the capital soon and couldn't ruin his career with a vulgar murder of his wife's lover. But Ippolit Matveyevich allowed himself a complete indiscretion. He had his carriage painted white and rode in it with the love-struck prosecutor's wife down Bolshaya Pushkinskaya Street. In vain, Elena Stanislavovna covered her marble face with a veil embroidered with black birds. Everyone recognized her. The city shuddered in fear, but this amorous excess had no effect on the prosecutor. Desperate moralists, teetotalers, and idealists began to bombard the Ministry of Justice itself with anonymous letters. Deputy Minister was astonished by the district prosecutor's cowardice. Everyone expected a duel. But the prosecutor, still avoiding the gun shop, drove to the courthouse every morning, sadly gazing at the figure of Themis holding scales, in one cup of which he clearly saw himself as the St. Petersburg prosecutor, and in the other, the rosy and brazen Vorobyaninov. Everything ended quite unexpectedly. Ippolit Matveyevich took the prosecutor's wife to Paris, and the prosecutor was transferred to Sizran. In Sizran, the prosecutor lived a long time, sent about 800 people to penal servitude, and eventually died. Ippolit Matveyevich and his companion arrived in Paris in the autumn. Paris was preparing for the World Exhibition. The still unfinished Eiffel Tower, resembling a crazy stool, horrified the idealists, moralists, and teetotalers of the God-saved city of Paris. In the evening at the hotel, Ippolit Matveyevich was introduced to Eiffel himself, a man of medium height with a Boulanger beard of salt and pepper, wearing horned spectacles. Because of him, an argument arose, not the first, by the way, between Ippolit Matveyevich and his mistress. Filled with information she had received from a young French engineer, a fellow traveler on the train, Elena Stanislavovna suddenly declared that she admired Mr. Eiffel's bold endeavors. "That tower will collapse on your Eiffel," Ippolit Matveyevich replied rudely. "I wouldn't even let such a fool build a stable." And a heated argument arose between the two Russians, ending with Ippolit Matveyevich impulsively buying a young, tall St. Bernard, which drove Elena Stanislavovna to feigned hysterics and nod through her new dress trimmed with black beads. In Paris, which smelled of paint shops, the young people had fun. They roamed the cabarets, ate boozy cherries, attended performances at the Comédie Française, and drank tea from a samovar specially ordered by Ippolit Matveevich from Russia, for which the hotel staff nicknamed them the honeymooners with the machine. They had an unsuccessful trip to the roulette wheel, but they no longer spoke of the plight of orphaned children or the picturesque beauty of Stargorod's park, because passion had imperceptibly faded, leaving only a habit of idle, cheerful life together. Elena Stanislavovna went to a famous fortune-teller, Madame de Sury, and returned unusually agitated. "No, you absolutely must go to her. She told me everything. It's amazing," Elena Stanislavovna insisted. But Ippolit Matveevich, who had lost 700 francs to a visiting Russian the day before, only looked at his coffee-colored pants with black stripes and unexpectedly said, "Let's go home, darling, it's time." Stargorod was covered in snow. Heavy carts passed slowly along Bolshaya Pushkinskaya. The icy trees of Alexander Boulevard were claimed by jackdaws. The jackdaws cawed unusually excitedly, resembling the annual meetings of the Society of Jewish Clerks. Snow stars, crosses, and other frosty insignia slowly landed on Ippolit Matveevich's nose. There was no wind. From the station, Ippolit Matveevich rode in a low sleigh, casually glancing at the city's sights. The new stock exchange building, built by the efforts of Stargorod merchants in the Assyrian-Babylonian style, the fire tower of the Pushkin district with 2 large round bombs hanging on it, indicating a medium-sized fire that had broken out in the area. "Who's burning, Mikhail?" Ippolit Matveevich asked the coachman. "The Balagurovs are burning for the second day." They hadn't traveled 2 blocks when they came across a small crowd of people standing dejectedly opposite the Balagurovs' house. Smoke slowly billowed from the open windows of the second floor. Suddenly, a fireman appeared in the window and lazily shouted down, "Vanya, give me the French ladder." The snow continued to fall. No one answered below. The fireman stood thoughtfully at the window, yawned, and indifferently disappeared into the smoke. "So it will burn for 5 days, Ippolit Matveevich said angrily. "Some, Paris." Vorobyaninov parted with Elena Stanislavovna very peacefully. He continued to visit her, sending her 300 rubles in an envelope every month, and wasn't at all offended when he found young officers with her, mostly lively and well-mannered. Ippolit Matveevich continued to live in his mansion on Denisovskaya Street, leading a carefree bachelor life. He took great care of his appearance, and wincing in pain, plucked the hairs protruding from his nostrils with steel tweezers. He attended the premieres at the City Theatre, and for a time became so fond of opera that he befriended the baritone Abramov and went through Germont's aria from La Traviata with him. "You forgot your dear land, you abandoned your native Provence." And they began to learn Rigolto's aria, "Courtesans, offspring of vice, you have cruelly mocked me." The baritone indignantly remarked that Ippolit Matveevich was living with his wife, a coloratura soprano. The scene that followed was terrible. The baritone, outraged to the depths of his soul, extorted 160 rubles from Vorobyaninov and left for Kazan. Ippolit Matveevich's scandalous escapades, and especially the beating of the sworn attorney Muruzi at the Noble Assembly Club, cemented his reputation as a demonic man. Even in 1905, which brought unrest and anxiety, Ippolit Matveevich was not abandoned by his natural cheerfulness and faith in the firm foundations of Russian statehood. Moreover, everything was quiet on Ippolit Matveevich's estate, except for the burning of several haystacks. Ippolit Matveevich rashly called Count Witt, who concluded the Treaty of Portsmouth, a traitor, but he never elaborated on this matter. New Year's did not change Ippolit Matveevich's life. He often visited St. Petersburg and Moscow, loved to listen to gypsies, making subtle distinctions between the St. Petersburg and Moscow ones, and visited his gymnasium comrades, who served in the Ministry of Internal Affairs or in the financial sector. Life passed cheerfully and quickly. Enterprising mothers no longer hunted Ippolit Matveevich. Everyone considered him an immoral bachelor. And suddenly, in 1911, Vorobyanov married the daughter of a neighbor, the wealthy landowner Petrov. This happened after the confirmed bachelor, visiting the estate, saw that his affairs had faltered and that it was impossible to fix them without a profitable marriage. The largest dowry could be obtained from Marie Petakova, a lanky and meek skeleton. For 2 months, Ippolit Matveevich laid white roses at the feet of the meek skeleton, and on the 3rd, he proposed, married, and was elected district leader of the nobility. "Well, how's your little skeleton?" Elena Stanislavovna, whom Ippolit Matveevich began to visit more often after the wedding, would ask gently. Ippolit Matveevich grinned cheerfully, bursting into laughter. "No, honestly, she's very sweet, but so naive. And Klavdia Ivanovna, you know, she calls me Ippolit. She thinks that's how it's pronounced in Paris. Remarkable." Over the years, Ippolit Matveevich's life changed noticeably. He turned gray early and beautifully. He developed small habits. Waking up in the morning, he would say to himself, "Guten Morgen" or "Bonjour." He was overcome by childish passions. He began to collect Zemstvo stamps, spent a lot of money on it, soon became the owner of the best collection in Russia, and began a lively correspondence with an Englishman, Enfield, who had the most complete collection of Russian Zemstvo stamps. Englishman's superiority in the field of collecting stamps of this kind greatly worried Ippolit Matveevich. The position of leader and extensive connections helped him in overcoming the insidious enemy from Glasgow. Ippolit Matveyevich persuaded the chairman of the Zemstvo Council to issue new stamps of the Stargorod Provincial Zemstvo, which hadn't been done for 10 years. Chairman of the council, a laughing old man, introduced by Ippolit Matveyevich to the essence of the matter, laughed for a long time and agreed to Vorobyaninov's proposal. New stamps were issued in the amount of 2 copies and included in the catalogue for 1912. Vorobyaninov personally broke the printing plate with a hammer. 3 months later, Ippolit Matveyevich received a polite letter from Enfield, in which the Englishman asked to sell him one of these rarest stamps at a price that Mr. Vorobyaninov would be pleased to set. Tears even appeared in Mr. Vorobyaninov's eyes from joy. He immediately sat down to write a reply to Mr. Enfield. In the letter, he wrote in Latin letters, Nakosia Vicasi. After that, business relations with Mr. Enfield ceased forever, and Ippolit Matveyevich's satisfied passion for stamps significantly weakened. At this time, Ippolit Matveyevich was called a bon vivant, and he really loved to live well. He lived, to the surprise of his mother-in-law, on the income from his wife's estate. Klavdia Ivanovna once even tried to share her views on life and the duties of an exemplary husband with him, but the son-in-law suddenly trembled, threw the sugar bowl on the floor, and shouted, "Remarkable, they're teaching me how to live. It's just remarkable." Immediately after this, the raging son-in-law drove off to Moscow to a banquet organized by the hunting club in honor of the killing of the 2000th wolf by the famous hunter Mr. Sherebarin since the club's founding. Tables were arranged in a semicircle. In the middle of the table, on a sugar tablecloth, among piglets, aspics, and sweaty carafes of vodka and cognac, lay the skin of the Jubilee wolf. Mr. Sherebarin, already drunk since morning and blinded by the magnesium of countless photographers, stood, looking wildly around, and listened to speeches. Ippolit Matveyevich was given the floor late, when he had already thoroughly cheered up. He quickly threw the wolf's skin over himself, and forgetting about family matters, solemnly said, "Ladies and gentlemen, members of the hunting club, allow me to congratulate you on behalf of the Stargorod lovers of gun hunting on such a significant event. It is very, very pleasant to see such esteemed lovers of gun hunting as Mr. Sherebarin, who, holding hands, are moving towards the achievement of eternal ideals. Very, very pleasant." Having said this speech, Ippolit Matveyevich threw the Jubilee skin on the floor, placed the resisting Mr. Sherebarin on it, and kissed him 3 times. On this visit, Ippolit Matveyevich stayed in Moscow for 2 weeks and returned cheerful and angry. The mother-in-law sulked, and Ippolit Matveyevich, to spite her, committed an act that gave such abundant food for the Prince of Denmark's malicious gossip. It was 1913. The 20th century was in full bloom. French aviator Brigitte de Moulin made his famous flight from Paris to Warsaw for the Pommery Prize. Ladies in basket hats with umbrellas and high school students met the conqueror of the air with enthusiastic hysterics. The conqueror of the air, despite the hardships he had endured, felt quite cheerful and willingly drank champagne. Life was in full swing. Urodonal chatelaine, as the giant advertisements proclaimed, instantly gave the kidneys their original freshness and immaculate purity. All newspapers daily printed the invigorating appeal of an anonymous Warsaw benefactor. Tormented by gonorrhea. Listen to me. Tormented readers eagerly listened to the words of the benefactor, hastily subscribed to the patented remedy, and received a chronic form of the disease. At the Alexander Station in Moscow, a crowd of students, porters, and members of the Free Aesthetics Society met the poet K.D. Beaumont, who had returned from Polynesia. A chubby young lady was the first to throw a wet rose at the troubadour with the goatee. The poet was showered with flowers of spring, lilies of the valley. The first welcoming speech began. "Dear Konstantin, you haven't been to Moscow for 7 years." After the speeches, an enraged admirer broke through to the troubadour and, handing the bouquet to the poet, said a memorized impromptu. "From behind the clouds, a ray of sun. Your genius. You are mighty. You are melodious. You are alive." In the evening at the Free Aesthetics Society, the celebration of the poet was overshadowed by the performance of the neo-futurist Mayakovsky, who inquired of the celebrated bard, "Doesn't it surprise him that all the greetings come from people he knows well?" Hissing and whistling covered the neo-futurist's speech. The 20th century was in full bloom. 2 young men, the 20-year-old Baron Jasmer and the son of a prominent official of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Dolmatov, met the wife of a reserve ensign, Mariana Time, in a movie theater and killed her to rob her. In the cinemas on wrinkled screens, there was a powerful drama in 3 parts from Russian life, Princess Beautyiskaya, a chronicle of world events, Eclair Journal, and the comic Talented Policeman, starring Paxson, Homeric laughter. A religious procession came out of the Spassky Gate of the Kremlin onto Red Square, and Archdeacon Rozov, a 10-pood giant, read the highest manifesto in a terrifying voice. In the Stargorod newspaper, Gazette of the Mayoralty, appeared a triumphant verse belonging to the pen of the local censor Plaxin. "Tell me, dear mother, what holiday is upon us? Why isn't brother Mitya in class? And father in a brilliant uniform? Brother Mitya was not in class on the occasion of the 300th anniversary of the House of Romanov, and fathers, indeed in brilliant uniforms and spacious tricorns, were driving in cabs to the shooting field, where a parade of garrison units, cadet corps, and state gymnasiums was scheduled. At the jute factory and in the railway workshops, workers were given tickets to the Romanov festivities in the sobriety garden, and in the evening, several civilians snatched 2 workers from the crowd of revelers and took them by cab to the gendarmerie. This made no noise, the festivities continued, and far beyond midnight in the dark sky, the fireworks' imperial monogram shone, contracted and blown by the wind, flared up again. At this very time, the worker Emnukin, holding a cap in his hand and feeling uncomfortable, stood before the table of the gendarmerie captain August. The captain was brief. "Who gave you the proclamations?" "No one gave them." "Then where did they come from?" "I don't know." 2 guards led Emnukin through the whole city, past the rope depot, the water tower, the cemetery, through wastelands to prison. Emnukin walked with a wide step, occasionally curiously looking at the tumbling fireworks, which were visible all the way. When the guards, having handed over the arrested man, returned back, there were no more fireworks, and in complete darkness a drunken woman swore obscenely. The same night, Ippolit Matveyevich, still smelling of perfume, was digesting a solemn dinner, sitting on the balcony of his mansion. He was only 38 years old. He had a clean, full, and high-quality body. All his teeth were in place. In his head, like a child in the mother's womb, a fresh Armenian anecdote stirred softly. Life seemed beautiful to him. The mother-in-law had been defeated, there was a lot of money, and next year he was planning a new trip abroad. Ippolit Matveyevich did not know that in a year, in May, his wife would die, and in July, a war with Germany would break out. He believed that by the age of 50 he would be a provincial leader, not knowing that in the 18th year he would be kicked out of his own house, and he, accustomed to comfortable and well-fed idleness, would leave the extinguished Stargorod to flee wherever his eyes looked in a freight passenger train. Ippolit Matveyevich, sitting on the balcony, saw in his imagination the fine ripples of the Ostend coast, the graphite roofs of Paris, the dark varnish and the shine of the copper buttons of international carriages. But Ippolit Matveyevich did not imagine, and if he did imagine, he still wouldn't understand bread lines, a frozen bed, an oily lamp, typhus delirium, and the slogan, "Do your job and leave," in the registry office of the county town of N. Ippolit Matveyevich, sitting on the balcony, also did not know that 14 years later, still a strong man, he would return to Stargorod and re-enter the very gates over which he is now sitting, enter as a stranger to look for his mother-in-law's treasure, foolishly hidden by her in a gam's chair, on which it is so comfortable for him to sit now, and looking at the blazing fireworks with the imperial coat of arms burning in the center, dream of how beautiful life is.